That night, the millionaire's perfect world shattered the moment she whispered, "Stay with me." Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever found yourself torn between a life you've built and a love you never expected? Today's story is about one man's perfectly planned world and the woman who turned it upside down. Ready to dive in? Let's begin. Elliot Wren lived his life like a perfectly drafted blueprint, precise, intentional, and flawlessly structured. As the founder and lead architect of Wren Atelier, a high-end design firm based in Manhattan, every step he took was measured, every decision rooted in control. By the age of 33, he had built a revered empire in the world of architecture, with luxury projects stretching from New York to Milan. His success wasn't just about talent, it was discipline, honed to an art form. From his tailored suits to his timeless cologne, from his steady gaze to his meticulously planned calendar, everything about Elliot exuded control. But beneath that polished exterior lay a secret few could ever guess. Elliot had never been in love. He had never been physically intimate with anyone. Not due to lack of opportunity, he had more than enough. But by choice, a choice rooted in the values his mother instilled in him, that true intimacy belonged only to true love, and no one should trade something sacred for loneliness or societal pressure. To Elliot, love was a luxury that didn't fit the blueprint. He had poured every ounce of his energy into building a future without cracks. But what he didn't know was that a single moment, a single unexpected woman, would soon tilt his carefully constructed world off its axis, and she wouldn't be part of any plan he had ever drawn. That morning, as soft sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 40th floor office, Elliot adjusted the cuff of his shirt when a knock sounded. "Mr. Wren, the new director of communications is here," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Elliot pressed the button, his tone as steady and exact as ever. "Send her in." The door opened, and disruption walked in. Maya Lennox was nothing like anyone who had ever stepped into Elliot Wren's office. Her naturally curly hair framed her face with effortless elegance, unpolished yet intentional. She wore an olive green tailored suit and caramel heels. Nothing flashy, but there was a grounded confidence in her presence that made Elliot pause longer than he meant to. "Thank you for this opportunity," Maya said, her voice warm, assured without being boastful. Elliot gestured to the chair across from him, watching as she sat with composed grace. A leather-bound notebook rested in her hands, a curious choice in his otherwise paperless environment, yet it oddly suited her. "Your background is impressive," Elliot began, eyes scanning her face. "Master's in Strategic Communications from Columbia, top of your class. 3 years at an international media agency, and then suddenly you leave New York to come here. Why?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Because sometimes the most interesting opportunities don't come from the most obvious places, Mr. Wren." Their eyes met, brief but intense. In that flicker of connection, Elliot felt something he hadn't in years: emotional unease. "This firm runs on structure," he continued, trying to steady himself, gaze shifting to his tablet. "Everyone has a defined purpose. Including you, of course." She nodded, but there was something in her tone, part challenge, part truth, that made his usually impenetrable wall falter. Throughout the orientation, Elliot outlined processes, expectations, policies. Maya listened, took notes, occasionally tucked a stray curl behind her ear, a small gesture, but one that pulled his eyes toward her every time. He found his usual equilibrium slipping, just slightly. As she reached the door to leave, Maya paused and turned to him, her gaze calm, her voice certain. "You know, Mr. Wren, sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from embracing a little chaos." The door closed behind her. Elliot remained still, staring at the space she had just occupied. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he had everything under control. In the 2 weeks since Maya had joined Wren Atelier, one truth had become undeniable. There was a strange electric current between her and Elliot. Impossible to name, harder to ignore. Each morning, Maya arrived early, coffee in one hand, his day meticulously organized in the other. When she handed him his tablet, their fingers would often graze, just briefly, but long enough to suspend the moment in silence. "Good morning, Mr. Wren," she'd say, always professional, but her eyes carried something softer. "Good morning, Ms. Lennox," he'd reply, his voice cool but laced with something unspoken, something he refused to acknowledge. That Tuesday, they flew to Montreal for a critical client meeting. The trip was scheduled with Elliot's usual precision. What he hadn't planned for was the sudden snowstorm that grounded all flights. When they reached the hotel, the concierge apologized. Only one suite with 2 bedrooms remained. "We're adults," Maya said with a quiet smile when Elliot hesitated, about to offer to find her another hotel. "I trust we can handle this like professionals." The suite was spacious and elegant, yet the air between them felt tight, charged. Maya changed into a soft ivory silk set, her curls loosely tied back, and settled on the sofa, reviewing reports. Elliot appeared moments later, shirt unbuttoned at the top, holding a glass of wine. "The snow's not letting up. We might be here another day," he said, eyes locked on her. She nodded. "Then you should rest. You look exhausted." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Elliot spoke, his voice low and conflicted. "Being around you, it shakes everything I've built to feel safe. I've never let anyone this close, and I don't know if I know how." She rose, walking toward him. "Because I see the parts of you no one else does." "I'm trying to keep a distance," he muttered, turning away, but she didn't back down. "Distance doesn't always equal strength. Sometimes real strength is letting yourself feel." He looked at her, really looked. In the soft glow of the lamp, they stood just close enough that one breath would bridge the space. "If I touch you, everything changes," he whispered. "Maybe everything needs to change." And then, like walls crumbling under a quiet storm, Elliot leaned in and kissed her, a slow, hesitant touch that deepened with each second. When they finally parted, breathless, their eyes stayed locked. That night in Montreal stopped being about business. It became a turning point. 3 days after returning from Montreal, Elliot still couldn't shake the echo of that night. He worked harder, spoke less, but his mind kept returning to Maya's touch, her gaze, her whispered words. Maybe. Everything needs to change. Change came faster than he expected, but not in the way he had hoped. On Friday afternoon, Elliot received a text from his father. "Dinner at home, 7 p.m. sharp, we need to talk." Charles Wren, architectural legend and honorary chairman of Wren Atelier, was a man of few words and high expectations. Elliot arrived on time, as always. The dining room was dimly lit, a glass of wine already poured, but the tension hung like fog. "Clarissa Vale will be joining us for dinner," Charles said as Elliot took his seat. "You remember her, Robert Vale's daughter? He controls 30% of the merger shares." Elliot froze. Clarissa, elegant, poised, and cold as marble. They'd attended a few society events together, always arranged, never real. "I wasn't aware tonight was that kind of dinner," Elliot said quietly. "It's not just dinner," Charles replied, raising his glass. "It's the beginning of something necessary. The firm needs stability, and nothing assures stakeholders like a CEO with a family image." "You're saying I need to marry Clarissa?" Elliot asked, voice low. "In 6 months. If you want to keep your position, it's non-negotiable." Not a suggestion, a mandate. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clarissa spoke fluently about art, investment, architecture, but not once did she ask how Elliot felt. She didn't need to. Her purpose was clear, just like his father's: stability. That night, Elliot returned to his penthouse, tore off his tie, unbuttoned his shirt, and still couldn't breathe. He texted Maya, "Can I see you tomorrow morning?" Her reply came minutes later, "Yes, but be honest." The next morning, in a small Soho cafe, Maya sat across from him. Her eyes were no longer soft, they were steady, expecting truth. "My father wants me to marry Clarissa Vale to secure the company," Elliot said plainly. "If I don't, I might lose everything." "And what are you going to do?" Maya asked, her voice soft, but every word landing like a weight on his chest. "I don't know," he admitted. "All I know is, If I choose you, everything I've built might fall apart. But if I choose them, I'm afraid I'll lose myself." Maya nodded slowly, but she didn't smile. "I can't be your temporary choice. I won't stay hidden, Elliot." She stood, her gaze fixed on him. "When you're ready to choose your heart over your image, find me. Until then, don't make me wait." Just days after his conversation with Maya, Elliot began sensing that something was wrong at the firm. Glances exchanged between board members felt sharper. Calls from the legal department lasted longer than usual. Then, on Monday morning, the silence shattered with one phone call. "We have a problem," the general counsel said, voice heavy. The leak hit the press within hours. Charles Wren was under investigation for manipulating property valuation data ahead of the merger. Internal documents had been uncovered, altered to inflate the worth of major projects. The purpose was clear: sway the other company's board into sealing the deal. The media erupted. The firm's stock plummeted by afternoon. Wren Atelier, long seen as a symbol of refinement and integrity in design, was now tainted by scandal. Elliot sat alone in his office, combing through the leaked documents, emails, contracts, reports. His father's fingerprint was everywhere. The language, the directives, the signatures. He hadn't known, or perhaps he hadn't wanted to know, what Charles Wren was willing to compromise to preserve his empire. Now all eyes turned to Elliot. He wasn't accused of wrongdoing, but he was the heir, the face of the firm, the man who'd just been named future CEO, and now he was at risk of going down with everything his father had built. And Maya? She had left 2 days earlier, no message, no goodbye. She had kept her promise. She wouldn't wait for a man who couldn't choose his heart. Late that night, Elliot sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights blurring through the glass. In the stillness, the truth cut through everything else. For years, he had poured his life into a legacy that had never truly belonged to him. And now he faced the hardest question of all: cling to everything and lose himself, or let it fall and finally become who he was meant to be. 3 days after the scandal broke, Elliot walked into the boardroom looking different. Not like an heir, but like a man who had lost everything, and in doing so, found something real. He stood before the board, meeting every eye around the table. "I'm stepping down as CEO. I can't and won't lead this firm while my father's actions cast a shadow over everything we do." The room fell into silence. A few faces remained unreadable. Some lowered their gaze, but no one objected. "We need a clean beginning, from the top, from the roots. I'm no longer the right person to represent that, but I'll support from the background. As a board member, not as a successor." He walked out without looking back. That evening, he typed the message he should have sent long ago. "Maya, I gave up what my father built, not out of anger, but because I finally saw what I was truly afraid of losing. Not power, not legacy, you." It took a while, but her reply finally came. "I'm in Boston. If you're truly ready to live with your heart, come find me." Elliot stared at the screen and exhaled, not in exhaustion, but in relief. He didn't know exactly what waited ahead. But this time, he would move forward, not for legacy, not for image, for himself. Boston welcomed Elliot with pale skies and a cool breeze, but to him, the city had never looked more beautiful. He stood outside the red brick building where Maya worked, holding an umbrella as a soft rain began to fall. When she stepped outside, she didn't speak. She paused for a moment, simply looked at him. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. They walked through the light rain in silence, and somehow it was more than enough. That night, they sat in Maya's apartment, the golden glow of the lamp casting warmth across her face. Elliot told her everything, stepping down from the firm, turning down Clarissa, the endless meetings, the crushing silence, and how it had taken all of that for him to finally understand what mattered most. "I'm not perfect anymore," Elliot said, "but for the first time, I feel like myself." Maya didn't say anything. She simply placed her hand over his. A week later, they returned to Manhattan to wrap things up. Elliot officially stepped away from every executive role. Maya accepted an offer from a creative consultancy in Los Angeles. Together, they moved. No legacy baggage, no titles, just two people choosing honesty. On their final night in New York, Elliot proposed in the small park where they'd had their first real conversation. The ring wasn't a flashy diamond, but a sapphire, blue, like his eyes. "I can't promise it'll be easy," he said, "but I can promise I won't pretend anymore, and if you'll have me, we can start fresh, this time for us." Maya nodded, tears catching in the city lights. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for them, that was more than enough to build a life on. Elliot and Maya's wedding took place on a golden autumn afternoon at a charming estate tucked in the rolling hills of Napa Valley, where the sky seemed to melt into the vineyards. It wasn't lavish or extravagant, just an intimate gathering of those who truly loved them, seated beneath white floral arches, serenaded by soft string music and warm sunlight. But the real magic wasn't in the setting. It was in the faces, some once distant, now present, smiling genuinely. Charles Wren, the once silent, rigid father, was the first to speak during the ceremony. His voice, softer now, carried years of reflection. "I used to believe building an empire was the most important thing," he said. "But today, watching my son hold the hand of the woman he loves, I realize my proudest moment is seeing Elliot choose love, bravely, completely." Maya's mother, who had raised her alone in a modest apartment in Chicago, couldn't hold back tears as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle. She once told me, "Mom, I'll never settle for halfway love," she shared. And now, seeing the way Elliot looks at her, I know she was right to wait. After the ceremony, during their first dance, Maya leaned in and whispered, "I used to think we'd just be an unfinished chapter." Elliot smiled, pulling her closer. "No, you were the beginning, and every chapter after this we'll write together." 3 years later, they lived in a small house near the ocean in Santa Monica, where mornings smelled of sea breeze and evenings of toast and laughter. Elliot had opened his own design studio. Maya consulted for nonprofits, helping meaningful voices be heard. They never returned to being heirs or figureheads. They were simply Elliot and Maya, two people who chose love, chose themselves, and built a life not perfect but real in every way that mattered.